every homily I've ever heard about this gospel has focused on the end of it, the wages that the landowner paid and the exchange he has with the workers. But I find the beginning of the gospel just as interesting. Before I go any further, I just want to kind of remind you, or maybe it's new information for you, the ancient Jews ordered their day differently than we do. They reckoned their day differently. We tend to do it by the hour, or we might say the work day, meaning like 9 to 5 or something. The Jews' day was divided into 8 sections of 3 hours each, called watches. And so the first watch would begin not so much 6 a.m. on the dot, but sunrise, and end at 9, when the second watch would start, which would end at noon, etc. So there were 4 day watches and 4 night watches. And the Jews would refer to time either by the hour. You remember during the crucifixion scene, we remember hearing that it was about the 6th hour, which means around noon. Or another section of the gospel, it said Jesus came to them in the 3rd watch of the night. So that would be sometime between midnight and 3. And so the landowner comes out in the beginning of the day. It makes sense to hire workers, right? The beginning of the workday. But he comes out again at 9 o'clock, and that makes sense in some ways. Maybe he missed some people in the beginning, and so hires some more workers. But he comes out again at noon and 3. And then it says at 5 o'clock, that's how it's translated here. Literally, it's at the 11th hour. And we know what that means. We use that phrase sometimes ourselves, Someone gets in at the 11th hour, they just snuck in, before the end. And so we have this landowner coming out at every new watch. Why? What does that mean? What might that mean for us? It might mean that he had that much work in his vineyard, because apparently he kept sending them off. They had work to do, And he came even toward the end of the day. The 11th hour. At most, they would have worked an hour. But he wanted to get that much work done. Does Jesus really have that much work to do in his vineyard? Yeah, if you think about it, the world, there's plenty of work to do, and there's always work to do. You might even say now more than ever. The world is certainly a more secular place than it was just 50 years ago. And atheism has grown. And not just atheism, but anti-theism has grown. There's a lot of work to do in the world. And so Jesus needs a lot of workers. And he's going to keep going out to find some, What is that work? Well, we generally think of it as evangelization, right? And the church has begun to talk about that again. A new evangelization, But sometimes for us, evangelization can bring up images of street preachers or something, And so I'd like to describe maybe that this evangelization can take on a different form than we normally think about. Think about how we talk about God. We say God is the God of light, the God of truth, the God of peace, God of compassion. We heard that in the psalm. The Lord is good, full of compassion, right? The Lord answers. Answers those who call on him. He's always near to those who call on him. And so, instead of picturing street preaching, we might say that what God needs done is to bring him in all his aspects into the world. And so, maybe you're not called to stand at the corner of Highland and North Fort Thomas with your Bible and preach, But maybe you're called to bring God's compassion into the world, or God's peace, God's forgiveness, God's truth, God's mercy, certainly God's love. And so you too can be workers in the vineyard, bringing whatever it is God has given you, And God needs it because the world needs him desperately. And when I face God, here's one question I do not want to hear. Why were you standing idle all day in the marketplace? And I don't want you to hear that either. You can't say, because no one has hired us. God desires you to go out. That's why he called you into the church, so he could send you back out again. And I want you to hear, and I want to hear, not why have you been standing idle all day, but well done, my good and faithful servant. You did what you could with what I gave you. The world needs plenty of workers out there, plenty of God's workers. And we are just the people to go out and do his work.